and welcome to another Pensions Unpacked. I'm Becky O'Connor, Head of Pensions and Savings at Interactive Investor, and joining me once more is James Jones-Tinsley, expert in all things pensions related, and pretty good on economic history too. And James joins us from Barnett Waddingham, the consultancy. So we've talked about many things over the course of recording these podcasts, but this time we're going to talk about, we're going to start with a report that Interactive put out last week called Show Me My Money. And, you know, it hints at perhaps us needing to rename these podcasts, James, because we talk about maybe renaming pensions to something more like future finance funds in the publication.
Yes.
I don't know if you support that measure or not, but
I very much support the need to rename pensions, because I think, as the report correctly says, it conjures up a lot of negative images. And it speaks of something that's years away for most people, but then when they get there, you know, it speaks of living in poverty, walking around with a stick, you know what I mean, and all those sort of negative connotations. So I think something which sort of said what it did on the tin more clearly and was more engaging for people, and especially the younger generation, I think that I'd be all for that.
I mean, totally. We do have an engagement issue on our hands, don't we? And we know the Department for Work and Pensions and the Pensions Minister, Guy Opperman, wants us as an industry to do more to engage people. And that was really kind of what the report was all about, is what people do and don't know about their pensions, and the size of the don't know responses to questions around fees, asset classes, pot sizes, let alone, you know, whether we know whether or not we're on track for a decent retirement. Because there's no relativity, is there? There's no way of comparing what we have to what we should have and what other people have. So that was kind of what we were getting at with the report. And if you're listening, I do recommend reading it. It's on the Interactive Investor website, but it's also a good basis to discuss some of the things that underpin the pensions industry now and how pensions work, and looking at auto enrolment and workplace savings, and you know, some of the inequalities there as well. And one of the questions in the report, one of the things it hints at, is this idea that defined contribution pot sizes and therefore retirement outcomes are very different to the outcomes for people who had older style defined benefit schemes through working life. And the average pot size, according to the report, is I mean, it might sound a lot, but actually when you convert it into retirement income, it isn't really. It is 86,000, and it's more than that for those aged over 55, around 130,000. But even so, that's not going to deliver a huge annual income, is it, compared with those older style defined benefit schemes? So I just wonder, James, if you could sort of talk us through the issues between defined benefit and defined contribution, and what people need to be aware of, really, as we switch between the two.
Yes, and I think, Becky, that's the key phrase, switching between the two, because I think we very much, as an economy, are going through a period of transition. And I think that was borne out in the report, particularly when the answers were split down by age. And those older people, myself included, who actually do still have some final salary schemes, as they used to be called back in the day, but defined benefit schemes, as we call them now. It's a very different way of building up and saving for your retirement than for the new defined, I say new, it's not new now, but defined contribution pensions, which clearly is the way forward now. And the day will come when, you know, people will just have defined contribution schemes. It's you know, many decades still to go, but we're in this transition period, and I think for people who have a mixture of the two, like myself, it is very much getting your head round the different ways of approaching it. Now, there are still some major DB schemes out there, particularly in the public sector. My wife is in the NHS pension scheme, for example, and I think the thing about that is that you have a far more degree of certainty in what your retirement's going to look like from far off, really, you know, as you're working your way towards the normal retirement date in the scheme. And I think the key difference is it's expressed as a pension and potentially a tax-free cash sum as well. So there is that sort of knowing what you're likely to be getting as a pension. And of course, the beautiful thing about it is it's guaranteed for the rest of your life and subject to ongoing increases as well, like the state pension, for example. So that's why, often you'll see them referred to as gold-plated in the press. Defined contribution is very, very different in that you're on your own. You're building up your own bucket of money. And of course, the more money you can get in there and the better the investment returns on that money, the bigger the pot is going to be when you get to retirement. And by default, the more pension you're going to be able to purchase, as well as taking potentially up to a quarter of it as tax-free cash. But the crucial difference is you don't know what you're going to get until you get there. And that's the challenge. It's because you're on your own. Yeah. The risk is all on your shoulders rather than the employers and trustees who run DB pension schemes. And that's why there's a need for greater engagement with DC schemes in particular.
Yeah, and particularly at the moment with the stock market as it is, and investments, some investments having suffered a loss of value. There is a potentially quite sizable hole in that bucket, isn't there? So you're filling it up, and then it's leaking out the other end in the form of potentially lost growth. But of course, we have long time frames for pension savings. So the idea is that over time, your pension investment can make up for any loss of value over shorter time periods, which is perhaps no consolation to those, though, who are in retirement, who need that money and are dealing with inflation and potentially a loss of investment value too. So it's really that difference is that lack of guarantee, isn't it? And the change in value really affecting your retirement directly.
And I think the other thing as well, Becky, is that it's okay having your future retirement expressed in terms of an annual pension plus, say, a tax-free cash sum as well. But it's common for people to look at that pension and think, oh, is that all? Based on maybe what their current salary is, or as you quite rightly say, given the situation we're in now economically, with inflation at a 30-year high, energy prices going through the roof, it's very easy to sort of still look on it and think, oh, that's not much. But then when you actually convert that pension into a one-off cash amount, like what you would be saving up in your bucket, you suddenly appreciate the value of it, and it's likely to be a six-figure sum, and we're talking hundreds of thousands, not just say 100,000 or something like that. And that's, in a way, I think that's a bit of a sort of a hidden thing, really, and I wish there was more transparency amongst DB schemes in actually saying this is what your pension's going to be. This is what you would physically need in your hands to go out and replicate that pension in the open annuity market. And I think a lot of people would be incredibly surprised at the amount that they'd be quoting.
That's a really good idea, and it would certainly make them realise the value of that when compared with peers who have the defined contribution pensions, which is an increasing number of us, and certainly most younger workers now, unless they are employed by the public sector. There are very few private sector defined benefit schemes now, of course.
Indeed.
I mean, one of the other changing things in the workplace is sort of we no longer have these jobs for life, do we? So gone are the days of guaranteed retirements from the job that you did for 40 years. But also the job that you did for 40 years is no longer a thing, is it? It's a thing of the past. And that, I've kind of lost count of the number of people in their 20s and 30s who've said to me that they've already lost track of pensions that they had in their early 20s. And they're not that old, but the job market is changing. People have several jobs now before they reach 30 and maybe move home several times because they're in rented accommodation and they move from a house share to a flat share to moving in with a girlfriend or boyfriend. And there are so many changes that make both the way we work and move between jobs and therefore how we manage our pensions taking place. And And that brings me neatly to the Pensions Dashboard Programme, which is another big policy initiative that is trying to bring all of our old pensions together, isn't it? Do you think this is a good thing? Do you know what's happening at the moment with the Dashboard Programme? Will it benefit younger workers?
Well, I hope it benefits everybody, really. I think that would be the optimum position. I mean, I've always been a full supporter of the concept of pension dashboards. It's the actual creation of them that is such a mammoth task. And I know when it was first announced by the government back in 2016, they were promising the first dashboard would be available by 2019. Well, when I last looked at my calendar, it said 2022 on it. So, and we're still waiting for the first one to appear. But I think, joking aside, it is a massive undertaking. And thankfully, we now have a group of people, the PDP, the Pensions Dashboard Programme, who are overseeing the creation of dashboards. And there are lots of different organisations involved as well in actually physically building the infrastructure, not forgetting, of course, the crucial role that providers will play in terms of providing the data. But then, to me, the most crucial and important thing of all is the security of the whole thing, because goodness me, can you imagine if something like that was hacked and suddenly everybody's pensions data was freely available on the internet? I mean, it really is a disaster in the making. So in a way, I'm glad they're not rushing it, because when it ultimately does appear, it does need to be as secure and watertight as possible. But I think also the quality of the data and the way that the data is presented is also key. And I'm very pleased to see that state pension data will be on there as well, because at one point there was a big question mark over that, because for most people the state pension is the bedrock of their ultimate overall retirement provision. So if it wasn't on there, it would be just like a massive hole. So I'm glad that's going to be included. And I think the other big question is whether, and again with security in mind, whether if somebody has a financial advisor, the advisor will be able to log on behalf of the individual as well, just to sort of see what that person's got. But I think just stepping back from all that, the actual ability to log on and see all your pensions, who they're with, because of all the mergers and acquisitions that have gone on over time, how to contact them, what the value is, and that could be expressed in terms of money, or for a DB scheme, pension and tax-free cash. It's a fantastic, they talk about sunlit uplands, and I think really that would be a crucial one for pensions for everybody, because it's a fantastic position to be in, to be able to see everything, and it will engage people and help them to track those lost pensions, because as you quite rightly say, Becky, I mean, I think the average number of jobs a person has now through their life is something like 11, and if everybody's doing a pension in all of those, that's a lot of pensions out there. And I know that there is a program going on looking at smaller pension pots and whether there should be some sort of consolidation exercise. And I remember when Sir Steve Webb was the pensions minister, he floated this concept of pot follows member, and I think it was quietly shelved by the subsequent Conservative government, but it would be lovely to see something along those lines come to fruition as well, so that people do hang on to all their pensions and not lose track of them.
Yeah, and of course it's not designed to enable people to consolidate or switch between providers per se. It's just a way of seeing all your pensions together and the total pot added up into something meaningful, and hopefully that may prompt engagement, and it may be that people then can see that although they can see all their pensions together, they want them to be in one place that is perhaps like a self-invested personal pension if they're really into investing, or if they like some of the investment funds offered by one former workplace provider, then they might choose to move it all into one. There may still be reasons for people to consider consolidating, is what I'm guessing at, even though they can now see all their pensions together.
Yes, and I think really just going back to the report you mentioned earlier, there are a number of factors to consider. Firstly, the costs, the fees that they're being charged in each of those pensions, because there is a very strong likelihood they will vary, especially depending upon the age of the pension in question. And then also, of course, it does make life easier to consolidate them and have them all in one place with one provider, and they've got your up-to-date address and all your details, and you know how to contact them and all that sort of thing. But I think the other crucial thing is when you are looking at consolidation or switching, it's important to know what you've got, because again, the further you go back, the more possibility is that those older style pensions may have certain features or benefits that would disappear if the funds were moved into a more modern, up-to-date pension. And so it really is, the pension dashboard creates that initial tableau that then allows people to start investigating and looking at the different pensions, what they've got, what the types of pensions are there any features like guaranteed annuity rates that are there at the moment and could be lost, but then also looking at the difference in fees and charges, and trying to arrive at an optimum position for them and for their retirement.
Yeah, because without that transparency, you can't really do anything, can you? But it's amazing in the report that actually people don't necessarily know whether they've got defined benefit or defined contribution pensions. And we asked them, we didn't put this in the report, but one of the questions in the research was, if you had to describe your pension, how would you describe it? And there was almost 30 different ways of describing the pension or naming the pension, which just goes to show, how little people know about things like defined benefit, defined contribution, what those actually mean, what final salary is, what career average is. Some people joked and, were saying rude things about their pension. But, it's very difficult to describe. So, maybe we do need this sort of future finance fund idea that just is, describes all of them in some way. And then you have different types within that, potentially. But that, we don't need to remove the word pension here and now today. But there's definitely an image problem there, isn't there, as you say?
There is. Yes, I agree. And I think really the answer to a lot of what the report has borne out is education. And if I was in a position to do it, I would make sure that children at primary school were being taught not just about pensions, but about mortgages and other and savings, and the importance of having a current account and all that sort of thing. I don't think you can start too early. And although in theory you can take out a pension on the day that you're born, for practical reasons that doesn't really happen. But, it would be great if people could start saving into a pension as young as possible and appreciating what they have. I mean, it's a great vehicle for parents and grandparents to put some money into because of the taxation advantages surrounding pensions. It could be a perfect Christmas and birthday present, and I know that a lot of grandparents do that already, but it would be lovely for it to sort of become the norm. And building on that with the education piece, people will be going into their working lives far more clued up with what pensions, or whatever we're going to call them in the future, are, and also how they work and how you can contribute and what the ultimate end goal is as well. To me, education is the answer.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I had a conversation with my 10-year-old a few weeks ago where he was asking about what I do and that kind of thing. And I told him what a pension was, and he was like, "Oh, do I have a pension?" And I said no, and he seemed quite disappointed. Like, why wouldn't I have this thing that's going to mean that I'm going to be very rich one day in his mind?
Well, I think that speaks volumes, doesn't it, really? But if you can get them engaged and make them sound exciting, and also very, very important as well for the future, then that's the way forward as far as I can see.
But James, they are exciting. They really are.
Well, I know that. You know that. We've got to convince the populace of that. That's the thing.
I think pensions dashboards will definitely help, but also I think that sort of understanding that a pension is an investment and, you can do things potentially within that. I mean, obviously Interactive Investor is a SIP provider, so it offers loads of investment choice, but even within workplace schemes, you can have some degree of choice usually now over what your money is invested in, and you can choose between different risk levels. And I think that's a really important point because people more often than not go into the default fund. That's usually kind of medium or low to medium risk proposition. But actually for younger savers, it's the higher growth earlier on in the career that potentially can, make up for maybe not being able to contribute as much or not having very generous employer contributions, and can make a huge difference to retirement outcomes. But because we don't know that, people just stick with the sort of middle of the road, middle ground option, and then potentially lose out without even realizing that they have lost out through that decision that's kind of a non-decision that's sort of made for them. I think that the default fund, education around default funds and risk levels and things too would be great.
Absolutely, yes.
And more options maybe.
I think this is it. And I know sort of a classic sales aid of days gone by was the cost of delay, encouraging people to start saving as early as they could. But I think certainly within the DB, when DB sort of ruled the roost, it did tie in with people working for one company for their entire working lifetime. And DB schemes are effectively modelled on the civil service pension scheme, which was the first DB scheme, if you like, in the country. And it was very much the way the calculations worked was very much based on 40/60ths, 2/3. It was all the old sort of inland revenue maximums and all that sort of thing, but it very much tied in with a person's working lifetime. And so it just rolled on in the background with minimal engagement by the employee. And then ultimately when they retired, boom, they got a tax-free cash and a guaranteed pension for the rest of their life. So a lot of it was done for them. And I think, again, we're transitioning from that mindset now into a period where even with the success of auto-enrolment, there is still a greater need for engagement of the individual employee as to what they're in, what they've got, and what choices they have to hopefully improve their pot size ready for when they ultimately retire.
Totally. And the younger the better. Pensions chat is not just for the oldies. Hopefully we've proved that today. That's all we've got time for, James. Thanks so much once again for running us through some of these key topics and for making pensions exciting. Well, they are already, making them more exciting. And you heard it here first. Future finance funds are the new pensions. Thanks for watching. Please give us a like and subscribe to the II YouTube channel for more episodes of Pensions Unpacked and to catch the next one as soon as it comes out.